What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Golden Dice Color Pie video. So I've done Luke, I've done Han. I figured I needed to give some love to a villain deck at this point. So we're going to jump in and we're going to do Boba Fett, who I really have enjoyed. I think he's arguably the best leader, definitely like top 3. Him coming out at 5 with 4/7. When an enemy unit leaves play, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, ready a resource. And then when he completes an attack, when he deploys, if a unit left play, he can ready up to 2 resources. And I figured I would wear my Boba Fett shirt for this as well. So I've had a lot of fun. He's been one of my favorites. It helps that he's, really good. So he's going to be fun to play with that way. But we're going to go ahead and take a look. I think him, Luke, and Han, honestly, all the colors you can put him in, I think they're actually pretty good. Blue, still kind of like feeling out and figuring out what that should be, but there definitely are some interesting options and probably even things that I already would change within the list that I have up here, the more that I think about it. But we're going to get into it and going to try to keep this video around like 20-25 minutes. We'll see how long the other ones were longer than that. But curious any feedback on the length of these as well. But starting off, these are basically the units that you can include. The ones that are individual are the ones that pretty much go in every version of the deck, and the ones on the side can come in and out depending on what you want. Can be sideboarded, can be things that you want to try as well. But Bosk is absolutely amazing. He synergizes with the fact that you are an event-heavy deck, especially compared to some of the other ones. Oftentimes I find my Boba Fett decks around 14, anywhere from 14 to 17 events, actually. So his 2 damage is going to get off consistently. Just the tricky part with him is keeping him alive, because you do want to use the ambush to clear something. So he often will only have 2 to 3 health left that the enemy needs to do damage to. Boba Fett, insane, arguably one of the best legendaries. 3 costs, doesn't matter if you're playing Boba or Thrawn, or if you're playing another leader with a splash of yellow. Boba Fett is probably going to go in that deck. For 3/5, the on attack, all of it is just amazing. There's literally no downside to this card at all. Greedo, in a similar vein, he's a really good turn 1 play. He synergizes with Boba's ability to get a resource back, so it is nice if you kill something, you don't have any resources, you get one back, and now you have a 1-drop to play. And he synergizes again with the event package, because his when defeated is you can discard a card from your deck, which would be the top card. And if it's not a unit, deal 2 damage to a ground unit. So Flock, you have to deal to a ground unit. You can't try to trade into space. Crafty Smuggler, just really good. Start the game, 2-drop, 2/2 with a shield. Helps you trade into a lot of things early, because Boba is kind of more of like a mid-range deck in almost every sense, mid-range kind of tempo deck. So him being able to slow down aggro decks, turn 1 and 2, Crafty Smuggler can definitely help that. Space is just awesome. 7th Fleet, 3 cost, 3/2 shield that can eat up those A-Wings and the red 3 as well. Fett's Fire Spray, probably the best card in the deck. It's a 5/6. It comes in ready. One of the reasons why Boba is just better than Thrawn in yellow is arguably because of this card, and Thrawn does not synergize with it. I mean, you could still run it in Thrawn. It'd just be a good 5/6 that can exhaust, but it coming in ready is so good. And now stuff on the side. Jabba's new. I'm still testing him. For me, in Yellow Villain, I still am probably going to run him in all the decks, and that mostly comes from the fact there's like no good 4-drops, or any 4-drops really, in Yellow Villain. So he, by default, is going to come in and be there. He makes tricks cost 1 less, and that is Waylay, Asteroid Sanctuary, Bamboozle, and Shoot First. So there's 4 cards that you can go in. We'll get into the events specifically, but I'm not necessarily going all in on that, and I don't think you should either. But he's a 4 cost, he's a 2/8 that they probably want to deal with, and he helps search your deck to get more cards into your hand as well. So and then you got Syndicate Lackeys. It's just a 5/4 ambush. Not amazing, but could be situational where you kind of want to have him come in. The Mining Guild TIE Fighter helps you with card draw. I've pretty much cut it from all my lists, but I still think it's something worth considering and worth talking about. And then the new one, the Pirated Starfighter, is actually one that I'm very interested in, and specifically the mono yellow version, where a lot of your stuff is on play effects. A lot of it has to do with bouncing, with shielded with the Crafty Smuggler that you see here. So that Starfighter being able to return those things to hand and just be an awesome unit in space is pretty good. And then there's the Bounty Hunter crew. I'm pretty mid on these guys, but I think they're worth a shout because there's a lot of good events that Boba wants to run. So being able to return those back in hand, thinking like, in the mono deck, putting Cunning back into your hand, and the green deck putting Overwhelming Barrage back in your hand. Like, there's some really good options that you could have with that, but the 4/4 for 6 is just really, really hard to swallow. And then get in the events, and this is, where yellow is. Shoot First, No Good to Me Dead, Surprise Strike, Change of Heart. For me, currently, are all, like, in the deck. Change of Heart is probably just a personal attachment for me. If you're like, Jack, that costs too much, it's a little clunky, not great. But, hey, man, once you Change of Heart, like an Obi-Wan or a 6/6 Lieutenant Childson, you're going to be like, wow, Change of Heart is a blast. The other ones are just kind of standard, good yellow ones. Waylay, I do actually think, is going to come in to the decks most consistently, especially with Jabba coming in. So I think Shoot First and Waylay are going to be the 6 tricks that you run, and then there's Asteroid Sanctuary and Outmaneuver, which are options as well. If you're going all in into one of the lanes, Outmaneuver could be decent. Asteroid Sanctuary, I've just cooled on. Like, it doesn't feel as good as it used to. The shield's not as relevant as I feel like it has been before in some of these yellow decks. And then the Bamboozle's in there too, but you can only really run that in the mono yellow because you're really going to be wanting to have a lot of those yellow cards in your hand. And then upgrades, there's really nothing exciting. Smuggling Compartment, Snapshot Reflexes. I talked about these in the Han video. Still pretty much the same. Han was a little bit more interesting with Smuggling Compartment. Boba less so. You're going to be able to get resources back anyways. This kind of seems like overkill to not be a very useful card in your 50. And Snapshot, I don't know if I really care to give 1/1 to anything and speed up my attacks. Could be interesting, but I'm going to opt out of pretty much both these in every single list. And then so getting into it, we're going to start off with Aggression. This was arguably one of the first meta decks of SWU history, and when there was 60, 70 cards out, this deck cranked. And this sat at the top of the page, I think. Either this or Tarkin from Garbage Rollers. Shout out to them. Both of their decks sat at the top of the page till they did a reset. And I think now it's like 60 days or 30 days or something like that. The hot decks refresh. But it runs Tarkin Town. There's a lot of good options in red to help close out the game, to do damage, to kill stuff. Force Choke is one of the better removals, but we'll take a look at what we got. But as you can see, the yellow package is pretty standard from what I said. There's Greedo, there's Shoot First. There's even Cartel Spacer in this one, No Good to Me Dead. Crafty Smuggler, Boba, all the stuff I had kind of talked about before. And then there's the units for red that come in. I mean, I think Death Star Stormtrooper has the same upside as I mentioned with Greedo. I don't love him as much as I used to in the deck, but I still think he's a good slot because he's a 1-drop that can come off of Boba's resets, resource resets. Fifth Brother is just a really good card. He scares me a lot sitting across from him. He's really good at taking out units, and if you can get those big swing plays in, you definitely can do 6 damage to a unit, right? If he's sitting with 2 damage on him, you deal 1 to him, 1 to another. There's a 1 on them. There's 3 on him, so then he swings them for 5, so he did a total of 6. So he can definitely snipe some big units. I've one-shot him with Grand Inquisitor, one-shot a Grand Inquisitor before with him. He's a lot of fun to play with. And then going to space, you have the Imperial Interceptor, which is great at eating up a lot of those pesky hero space units. And then Ruthless Raider is just it's a pretty good finisher. I mean, it's at 6. It competes with Fett's Fire Spray. Fett's Fire Spray, I do think, is better, but there's definitely situations where doing this and dealing 2 damage to an enemy base and 2 damage to an enemy unit and resetting a resource is going to be very, very relevant, because that's when played and when defeated as well. So I like it. It's certainly interesting. I do think Fett's Fire Spray is better, but like I said, there's situations where that could be really good. And then some of the other units, the sideboard, First Legion Snowtrooper, he's just kind of fine. He's a 2/3, he's Overwhelm. It feels good to overwhelm damage into base, kill a unit, and get a resource back, but sometimes that's been a little bit trickier to play. Disabling Fang Fighter, I think, is at this point in the game a sideboard in every red deck, it feels like. Upgrades are becoming very, very prevalent. It's a fine body at 3/2, so if you want to get rid of a Traitorous, a Jedi Lightsaber, a Fallen Lightsaber, like, this is going to be a really, really good card to do that. Storming Scout is fine. It's got good attack. The card draw is decent. Yeah, I mean, it is what it has been for the last little bit. And then there's Seven Sister, which I think is just like an interesting card. Feels so slow, but the turns that you do get to do 3 into base with her and then 3 into a unit, kill it, reset a resource, like those are going to be plays that feel really good. But at 5, it definitely feels a little weird, right? You know, you'd much rather play Bosk, you'd rather do some events, but I don't know. It could be worth a shout, worth a try. And then if you're playing Fifth Brother and Seventh Sister, maybe you put Force Throw in. I don't think so, but we'll look at the events and upgrades. Like I said, Force Stroke, absolutely amazing removal. Sometimes I forget that it costs 1 less when Fifth Brother is out because Force Stroke at 2 even is just so good. It takes care of most units, takes care of a lot of these aggression units, and you know, you almost don't mind playing that turn 1. I don't love it to have my opponent draw a card turn 1, but if that's all you have, that's all you have. You know, you Force Choke something and you play a Greedo or you play a Stormtrooper. Like, that's not a bad turn 1. Your hand is very tiny now, but yeah, you live. Fallen Lightsaber is actually one that I'm kind of interested in because just a 3/3 stat line is pretty cool. So, you know, if you bring in something like Seven Sister and you add in Lightsaber, there's now 2 Force users that have the option to get that on-play ability. But even, you know, Boba deploys and you just put this onto him, make him a 7/10, like, that's going to be really hard for your opponents to deal with. And then some of the events, you know, I've got pretty much Force Choke in there consistently. Like, in sideboard, not that it necessarily is a sideboard, but I kind of put some of my top options as a sideboard. You know, there's Open Fire, just 3 for 4, get rid of most things. Precision Strike, you don't really have a lot, if any, troopers. I really think it's just the Death Star Stormtrooper. I used to have more troopers in. They have come out, so that one can really honestly just not even be in consideration at this point unless you do put a heavy trooper package in, but I'm not sure that is needed. The mission briefing, drawing. Boba needs cards a lot, especially the turn that he comes out. He wants to play a lot of things. His hand runs empty, but I still don't know if I actually do love playing that card. Keep fighting a ready unit. There's, you know, some good on attacks with 3 or less, right? Being able to ready Boba Fett to help clear the board, you know, if there's 2 exhausted units that he can ping into, would be really, really valuable. And then Force Thrower, like I said, if you get up to those 2 Force units, maybe it comes in. You know, it's a good card. Everybody knows that. It's just Villain struggles a little bit with keeping Force units on the board because Fifth Brother deals damage to himself, and then the next cheapest is a 5 cost. So it can be in consideration, but it definitely can be rough to pull off. And then now this is probably my favorite of the 4, spoiler, I guess. But Green. Green just has a lot of options. Some of the best cards in the game are in this deck. You know, as you can see, Darth Vader, Overwhelming Barrage, you got Super Laser Tech, and I think Shore Trooper is an amazing 2-drop. So we'll get into it. Like I said, Seasoned Shore Trooper, Super Laser Tech, Darth Vader, to me, are all going to be 3-ofs within the deck. The Super Laser Tech obviously just ramps. You know, it being able to trade with the unit can be really, really good. The Seasoned Shore Trooper is fine at 2/3, but when you look at it and combine it with Darth Vader, Seasoned Shore Trooper, you're honestly pretty content playing a 5/7 and playing a 4/3, 4/7. It's really good. I like him a lot. You're going to get to 6 resources in this deck. You know, you're going to do that no matter what, even if Vader wasn't in here, because you're going to play the Fire Spray. And then the other shouts are like Callus. He can be pretty good at stabilizing against some aggro decks. The Star Viper can be pretty good if you have initiative. And actually with ECL, it can have some pretty punishing plays where you ambush that in, kill an A-Wing, and restore 2 if you have the initiative. So the key thing with that, obviously, is the initiative. Boba can go kind of slow because he's using a lot of resources, playing a lot of cards. You don't have it as often, but it is certainly something if you're really struggling into aggro to slot this in and kind of see how that goes, especially in space. We're a little bit light. We just have the Cartel Spacer, the 7th Fleet, and the Fire Spray in this. And then that also brings in the Gladiator, Star Destroyer. This has kind of fallen off for me, but I think in a pinch, it can be really nice to just give Sentinel to a unit to buy another round, you know, to get into the Darth Vader turns, and then he can help stabilize in ground. So that's kind of where I'm at. Those first 3 definitely in the deck. The other 3 certainly can be options. And then you get to events and upgrades. Obviously, Overwhelming Barrage is in the deck. That is one of the best cards in the game. It's like a soft board wipe in a sense. You know, it's not like pay 5, defeat all units. It's pay 5, buff your unit, defeat however much damage. So you're not going to necessarily wipe the board every time, but you're certainly going to do a lot of damage, and your opponent's going to be sad to see it. Some other things, resupply actually has come out for me, and it's on the sideboard. I feel like I didn't need it on top of the Super Laser Tech. I think I'd just rather run the Super Laser Tech. If I'm able to trade it with ECL or whatever else it might be, it can be really good to get a resource, right? If you ECL in at 3, you kill something, you ready resource with Boba, and then the Super Laser Tech comes in ready, you now still have 2 resources that round to mess around with. So resupply doesn't really give you that option. It definitely can be good if you resupply, kill something, ready. There's still some good high-end for that, but for me, that's kind of come out and come on the sideboard. If you're going into longer games, I think it could be a decent bring-in for that. Strike True's been really impressive for me in a lot of decks. Really great removal. 3, you have a lot of pretty decent sized attack units. Vader obviously, Bosk, even Boba Fett at 3. That kind of feels bad to go under what open fire can be, but you have some decent options, and fire spray's a 5 as well. Vader's a 5, so it's not terrible, but I don't think it necessarily makes the cut in this. And Recruit is interesting because it falls into that same category of Greedo and Stormtrooper, of it being a 1-drop. If you have nothing else to play, you can play this and make sure that you have the card that you want for the next round or the next 2 rounds, right? And make sure you can get Vader or Fett's Fire Spray on curve. And then there's Academy Trading. There's the Hardpoint Heavy Blaster. Both those are just 2 for 2, 2/2. They're fine. Don't really love them. Again, Academy Trading on some of these units could be really good, like Bosk or on Boba, your leader, just to keep them around longer. And Traders is actually a card that I've been loving. Don't know if it goes into Boba Green, but this deck, or that card, has made for some crazy swing plays. You know how I mentioned where 5th Brother one-shot Grand Inquisitor? Yeah, that was off of a Traitorous, where I took his 5th Brother and then I killed his Grand Inquisitor. I've also taken a beefy Akbar who had like 2 experience on him and stuff, so Traitorous is a solid card. Just this deck is very, very tight. There's a lot of good cards in this deck. But then we're going to jump over to probably the closest thing to a negative play experience that we have in this game, and that is mono yellow Boba. There's a lot of good cards in this deck. You are losing out on some really good, losing out on red, you're losing out on Force Stroke. Green, you're losing out on Vader and Overwhelming Barrage. But what you're getting is you're getting Cunning, you're getting Bodhi Rook, and you're getting the Cantina Bouncer, which are all amazing plays. If you can hit Cunning on curve in this deck and get a resource back, it's one of the hardest things to deal with for any deck. So going in the units, I bring in the Outer Rim Headhunter, and it really is just a way to have another 2-drop. I'm not super happy with this. It definitely can be nice if Boba sticks around. You're exhausting units and stuff, but I don't love it. But it's a 2-drop and definitely can come out as we get better turn 1 plays for Boba. The Bodhi Rook is amazing. He's a 3/3/3, a little understated, but that's still fine because when played, look at opponent's hand and discard a non-unit card from hand. So even just getting that card advantage, you play something onto the field, they lose a card, can be really, really good. If you don't hit anything, then they don't have any events to worry about coming up. Then Cantina Bouncer, just crazy tempo play. You're paying 5 for 3/5, understated, yes, but the ability, insane. The fact it can bounce any unit is going to be really, really good. It's Waylay on a stick. Not much to explain. And since we're mono yellow, you're going to want to look at all the options that you do have. The Mining Guild tie, like I talked about before. The Syndicate Lackeys, like I talked about. The Bounty Hunter crew. Adding some of these events, is fine, but it's really, like, if you can bring back Cunning, that's going to be awesome for you, and you're going to be very, very happy to do that, even though it's a 4/4. And then Pirated Space Starfighter is actually... I should update this list to have it in here, I believe. I don't even know if I had it in the sideboard. I don't think I did. But this almost seems like a perfect home for this, right? With Crafty Smuggler, with Bodhi Rook, with Bosk, with Jabba, with Cantina Bouncer, with 7 Fleet, with Cartel Spacer. Like, there are so many units that you don't mind bouncing because they have an on-play effect or they do something when they come in, right? Whether it's ambush or whether it's a shielded or whether it is something that, search for, a card from your discard pile and take it, or Jabba, search the top 8 cards. So I'm actually really interested to play this. 3/4 in space, 2 with Raid 1, is really, really good. I think it's worth looking at, and there's some good things that you wouldn't mind bouncing, but you just have to keep in consideration that it is not a turn 1 play because it would bounce itself if it's the only thing. And then events upgrades. We already talked about the upgrades, but the event, arguably the best card in the game. No, not best card in the game, but it definitely feels like it at times. Definitely the best like double aspect card essentially of that. And it's really good. Return a non-leader to its hand with 4 or less power. Give a unit +4. Exhaust up to 2 units. An opponent discards a random card from hand. So just that play where you return a unit and you exhaust 2 other ones is going to feel really, really good. With Boba, you get a resource back if you do return 1 to hand. So essentially playing this for 3 can feel really, really good. And against some of these decks that against non-yellow decks, and I mean, I guess blue decks do have takedown as well, but a lot of times I was able to return something to hand, and then I would buff my 7th Fleet Defender or Crafty Smuggler, who are both shielded, to then get that +4 attack. But that also depends, right? You don't want to do the +4 attack and then walk into a takedown, or walk into an Asteroid Sanctuary or something that would exhaust that unit and make you feel pretty bad about that. But yellow is definitely, mono yellow Boba is definitely a viable deck, and is insane tempo plays with this card. The fact that this deck hinges almost on this is very, very true, right? If you don't see this, you're going to be pretty sad. Don't send it to the bottom with Jabba. You're going to be sad. And then last we have Alabaster Batman is Boba with blue. Critique this all you want. This is really just a starting point, even for myself, because I really have not played this that much. You could be like, Jack, Delmico at 2, like the Scout Bike, like none of that makes sense, dude. What are you doing? Probably you're right, but I'm at a pretty much just trying to do a starting point. And blue is actually very, very interesting to me. I mean, stuff like let's get into the units. Stuff like Death Trooper, being able to be an on-played and kill something can be very, very good. Reset a resource almost immediately on its on-play effect and not have to trade another unit to get that resource reset is very good. Del Miko is interesting. I think just like 3/3 is fine. Restore 1, can be good in the mirror, good against these decks that are also event-heavy. He's not going to stick around long. He's like Veers. He almost dies instantly to most things, but if you're forcing your opponent to go at him and not some of your other stuff, I think you're going to feel okay. Mostly him on curve feels bad, but I feel like later when your opponent has a few options and, if they go for something else and he stays around, then, you feel pretty good about that. Inferno 4 is awesome because of the fact that it can help search your deck for the cards that you want, right? If you still don't have Fett's Fire Spray in your hand, being able to play this or even Kamikaze it and to kill something and get a good trade to get its 1 defeated, to look at the top 2 cards, and then either put them on top or on the bottom is really, really good. And the Scout Bike Pursuer is just a turn 1 play, essentially. We are at 15 in this, so he definitely can come out, and I do think he would come out the more I think about it for the guy with the lightsaber. We'll see in just a second. But some other potential things are Regional Governor. That's a meta call of, do you want to bring that in? And, what is it you actually want to stop? What is going to hamper your game plan? The System Patrolcraft is interesting because it's a 3/4 Sentinel in space, so it can eat up like 2 A-Wings, or a red 3 and an A-Wing. It's interesting. And then the Academy Defense Walker, same thing. It's in ground. It's a good Sentinel unit. I don't know how much you actually get off its ability with the experience tokens to a damaged unit, but it's certainly something to slow them down. There's nothing else as a 6-drop in this deck for ground units, just Fett's Fire Spray in space. So it certainly has an option for itself. And you could argue that, again, there's too many turn 1 plays in this specific deck with a 15, and then I probably have too many 3-drops because I have 3 Boba Fett, 3 Death Trooper, and 2 Del Micos, and then 3 7 Fleet Defenders. So I'm definitely going to hit my curve, but the issue is that as the game goes on, I'm not going to have units that are as effective as my opponents if they curved out a little higher or a little bit more even. And then Count Dooku, I think, he's a really good card. If you play him, get a resource back from his 1 played, you're going to feel really, really good. So I like him a lot. Probably should go in the deck for that reason, in that he can defeat something the second he's played and get you that resource. So upgrades and events, I mean, Takedown and Vanquish are being played more and more. Vanquish, more specifically, there's a lot of these big units coming into play. There's Luke Skywalker, there's Vader, there's, even stuff like Yoda with a lightsaber, Ezra with a lightsaber. It can be pretty scary. I think Vanquish is a decent option to at least have 2 of in your sideboard would be me. And so, currently most of my blue decks, I'm like 2 takedown, 2 vanquish. And the other one that's interesting for me in this, and it's in the sideboard, is Moment of Peace. I think it could be really interesting to give a shield to a lot of these units that you have, right? Being able to deploy your leader, give him a shield, kill something, get 2 resources back, play something else can be really, really good. So there's a lot of things that I would like to stick around more, right? Giving Boba Fett a shield, giving Fett's Fire Spray a shield. I think there's a lot of good targets in this deck. And then on side, there's some of the things that you have normally seen. Entrench is currently in the sideboard, but probably should come into the main. It's so flexible, such a good card. But honestly, it's in the sideboard for me simply because I want to try other things. Because I've been putting Entrench in every single blue deck because I've loved the card. But for this, I was almost trying to think of ways that actually do defeat units more than Entrench, which doesn't. It obviously cancels them out if they're in space, but considering one of my best win cons is in space, I don't necessarily want to just start entrenching space willy-nilly. And then there's a Resilient. You're in blue. If you want to buff out one of your units, that's fine. Repair, you can heal some of your stuff. And Make an Opening actually is one of the interesting ones for me. Give -2, heal 2 damage, and potentially get a resource back, right, if you can do that. Or at least guarantee it. The next attack, right, the thing's -2, and now you can definitely kill it with one of your units. I think can be really good. And healing your base, I think, is just a little bonus on there. So having that be 3 and get a resource back can be really, really good. So, but this is a very unknown deck for me. Maybe you have played it and maybe you've tried it, but for me, this is a good starting point and something that I do want to try in our upcoming gameplay videos. But those are all the decks for Boba. I really like him a lot. You could try any of these decks and it probably will perform at a decent rate. But if you had to go right here, this is my ranking. There we go. So all the way up at the top, I have Boba Command, and then I go to Aggression, and then wait, that should be swapped. So it should be Command, and then it should be Cunning, then it should be Aggression, and then it should be Vigilance. But I do think Aggression and Cunning are kind of close. Cunning can really just be so hit or miss on whether or not you find Cunning, the card itself. So, if you go through the game and don't play any Cunnings, then it's probably as good as Aggression. And I don't think Aggression is necessarily bad. I think it just got passed by a lot of more recent spoilers and cards coming out and decks starting to synergize a little bit more. So yeah, that's what I have for Boba. I hope you enjoy this. Try to keep it a little short. It looks like we're at 27 minutes right now. If you have any feedback on this, as we always go, or what leader you want to see next, feel free to leave a comment and be sure to like and subscribe to the page. And we will catch you all next time. Thanks for tuning in.